And here with you and on the line with us, Professor Richard Wolff, the economist, co-founder of Democracy at Work, author most recently of Capitalism's Crisis Deepens, Essays on the Global Economic Meltdown. Professor Wolff, pardon? Oh, Professor Wolff, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tom. Glad to be here.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a bunch of stuff in the news right now. The Trump administration waives punishment for convicted banks, including Deutsche Bank, which Trump owes millions to. Can you tell me about this?
Yes, it's really an astonishing kind of story. If you look back since the late 1990s, Donald Trump, in his various retail and real estate ventures, has had to borrow huge amounts of money from banks. Because he went bankrupt repeatedly, large numbers of those banks got burnt and basically refused to do business with him. One of those who saw into the future, perhaps, that decided to step in where other banks hesitated was the leading German bank known as Deutsche Bank. And so over the years, they have lent Donald Trump and his ventures billions, that's with a B, billions of dollars, and he currently owes them because they also had their troubles, these loans, and there were problems between Trump and Deutsche Bank. But they worked those things out. They made enough money, both of them, to get around various rules and laws. And currently, the estimate of the New York Times and others is that Trump owes them in the neighborhood of $300 or $400 million. Why is this important? Because last week, once again, the American government, and Trump, by the way, is not alone in doing this, Obama did it also, provided all kinds of special exemptions to the Deutsche Bank so that it would not have to pay as much, or it wouldn't have to pay as soon, or it wouldn't have to pay at all some of the penalties that were imposed on that bank for basically having violated every major rule governing banking. That is, the Deutsche Bank has been found guilty of money laundering for illegal or corrupt maneuvers, particularly with Russia. They've been part of the LIBOR scandal of banks setting interest rates in ways that would make them money and cost all the rest of us extra on our credit, for having been badly burnt in mishandling the mortgage crisis that led to the collapse of 2008. Deutsche Bank is guilty of all of that. And then last week, the Trump administration gave them a pass on some of the various penalties and so forth. They've been assessed for doing these bad things. And of course, the question arises everywhere in the world, is Mr. Trump and his administration going lightly on this bank because he owes them money and they will give him a nice break when the time comes, maybe when the limelight isn't on him? It is a very smelly conflict of interest at the very least.
Yeah, it seems remarkable. Meanwhile, the government of China announced, or sort of announced, I'm getting mixed messages on this, day before yesterday, I believe it was, that they were going to dial back their purchases of U.S. bonds and even suggested, or seemed to suggest, that they were going to start selling U.S. bonds, get them out of their portfolio. There was a headline in the Financial Times, I believe it was, U.S. government bond sell-off triggers warnings. Is that the consequence of this? U.S. stocks, bond dollar lower on China Treasury buying jitters. What's the story here? What does and how does this matter to the average American, particularly the average American who may have a 401k?
Well, I can tell you that there's a number of ways of answering that, but let's start with, again, the Trump administration. They just pushed through, as you all know, an enormous tax cut for business. It'll be too difficult politically to pay for that by cutting massively social programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and so on. So what the government is likely to do is go in and borrow a lot of money to make up so they can do what they have to do for the money they're no longer taxing from big corporations. That means the government will be a big, heavy borrower for years into the future. Now here comes China. China is the biggest creditor of the United States. That is, the Chinese People's Republic of China has lent more money to Uncle Sam than any other country. It's measured in the trillions, et cetera, et cetera. If the Chinese have decided that further lending to the United States, since they already have lent so much, is not a good idea for them for all kinds of reasons, we have a real problem because the American government has to borrow, and their single largest creditor of recent decades is going to be, or seems to be, unwilling to lend. The way that little story ends is that the government of the United States, in order to borrow, will have to persuade other people, other than the Chinese, to step in and loan the money, and the only way you can get them to do that is to raise interest rates, and that means the mortgages we all have in America, the car payments we all have to make, the credit card payments we make, our children's college debt that they have to cover, all of the costs of that will go up. So it'll affect every single person listening to this conversation if indeed the Chinese have made that kind of decision.
So what evidence do we have that they did or that they didn't? The news reports I've read seem ambiguous or contradictory.
Well, I think the Chinese themselves have to worry about it. You know, if they don't lend, if interest rates go up, if that makes the American economy stumble in ways that a lot of people are afraid it might, and not just the American economy, but other economies, the European and Japanese, who have been having this quantitative easing, this easy money situation now for many years, then the Chinese stand to lose. Their economy still depends on the West buying everything they produce, or almost everything they produce, and therefore it's a kind of a dicey problem for them. They want to protect themselves against the decline of the United States. On the other hand, they don't want to get burnt by that decline, and they walk a tightrope between whether protecting themselves in the short run by getting rid of the dollars they own, the debts of the United States that they own. Is that a good idea, or will that contribute to an economic downturn that can hurt them in other ways? That's why they haven't acted on this situation in the past, but everybody who follows this realizes that at some point there'll be a tipping point, and they will decide that the decline in the United States is so scary that it'd be safer for them to stop lending or even to unload the debts that they already own rather than accumulating more of them. And the jitteriness you feel and the mixed messages you're getting are because of the anxiety that we might be at or near that tipping point.
Yeah, we have about 30 seconds left. Isn't this a weapon that the Chinese could use against us if, for example, we got in a conflict with them over the Spratly Islands or over trade?
Oh, they not only can they already have. Everybody in the world who pays attention knows that if the United States goes beyond a certain point of verbal this or that about China and actually begins to threaten them, they have mammoth weapons with which to respond and punish the United States. Not the least of those is the fact that they could unload a quantity of dollars that would make the value of the dollar very, very shaky. That's within the power of the People's Republic of China to do, and it disciplines what the Americans can do beyond saber rattling and verbiage because of what might happen in the way of a Chinese response.